As the co-producer and co-host of S.V.O.H, Sexy Voices of Hollywood, along with my co-producer and co-host Yayoi Winfrey, I would like to personally take a moment to announce that this particular episode number 10 of S.V.O.H is a special one, as not only is it episode number 10, but also year number 2 of our talk show. From this point forward, we are going to be working with top sponsors, prominent advertising firms, and the support of major investors. S.V.O.H has reached this milestone by way of our fans, audiences, and supporters, coupled with that of our own hard work. Even though we have offered a slideshow up to this point, it has not been easy to produce a celebrity talk show every other week for as long as we have. It is not as easy as it may appear to coordinate activities in 3 different geographic locations in multiple time zones with 3 people per show, as has been our format thus far. In addition, Hollywood celebrities, as you know, often have a very limited amount of time given certain schedules, events, and other activities. Nonetheless, this is episode number 10 with featured guest Kristina Wong. Not only did she have one of the very first personal websites in the world, but you will also come to find that she has one of the most well-made and best-looking websites on the internet. Kristina has performed in many different cities throughout North America, and in addition to comedy and being on tour, she is involved in workshops and organizes social, political performances. Kristina Wong is the quintessential, hard-working producer, performer, entertainer who exemplifies self-promotion, independent spirit, and entrepreneurial business savvy. She shares a common thread with each and every guest who we have had on our show, as well as a common thread with future guests. Next, I want to give a shout out to one of California's and Korea's top emerging artists, Tommy Kita. As part of this special episode number 10, and to open our show, S.V.O.H, Sexy Voices of Hollywood, gives full-on props to the artistic work of Tommy Kita, the group Diamond Effect, and their promoter, the lovely Eunhee Silver Lee of Busan, South Korea. In addition to being a major promoter and supporter of Tommy Kita and Diamond Effect, Eunhee Silver Lee has been a supporter and fan of S.V.O.H, Sexy Voices of Hollywood. She has done a fabulous job. For those very reasons, and of course, the great talent of Tommy Kita and group Diamond Effect, S.V.O.H gives credit where it's due and helps to cross-promote deserving artists, promoters, producers, and others. Once again, thank you to all our past, present, and future allies, fans, guests, and supporters for helping to make S.V.O.H Sexy Voices of Hollywood a major success. Greetings and welcome to Sexy Voices of Hollywood with your hosts Robert Taylor and
Yayoi Winfrey.
Every other week on this show, we'll present another Sexy Voice of Hollywood.
This week's guest is Kristina Wong, big bad Chinese mama. Besides having a sexy Hollywood voice, Kristina is an accomplished writer, director, producer, and performance artist who has appeared in numerous stage productions. She's also a media-savvy social networker and one of the first to design a personal website. Check out Kristina's website at www.kristinawong.com. And she spells her name with a K.
That link will be posted on our YouTube page, Sexy Voices of Hollywood. Welcome to the show, Kristina.
Welcome. Here I am, so sexy.
Definitely. Thanks for being with us today.
Okay. All right, well, tell us, Miss Sexy Voice of Hollywood, Kristina, what attracted you to performance art?
I think it had to do with like a lack of a good therapist, and I was thinking, what's the most shameful thing I can do to my family? Oh, I know. I'll get into a career where I can pull things out of a metaphorical vagina in front of people, and that's where I am today. I am a working performance artist, and I tour the country self-ridiculing myself, and self-ridiculing myself, that's double. That's how much I do it. I not only self-ridicule, but I do it to myself. So that's, I guess, my whole background is I grew up in San Francisco, and I realized around the time I was in high school, I kind of discovered theater, and in the high school I went to, we mostly just did, like, dead white people plays, like Neil Simon and stuff like that, and it was just exciting for me to be in front of people, and to be more than this kind of anonymous Asian woman, and I want this to be my life, and it just seemed so much more exciting than the other options in front of me, and I didn't really understand politically what it meant to be in front of people, or to be in front of people as a person of color, or to present yourself, and what all this other kind of impact for me was just like, ooh, people are watching me, yay. And I got to college, I had my whole identity meltdown that a lot of people who go to UCLA have their first year, or I guess anytime you have to step outside of the the environment you're raised in and look at it, you go, wow. I had no idea all this stuff was happening in my life that I never registered. I had no idea how much race and gender had affected my life and things like that. And I had all these ulcers because I was so angry at the man in the first year of school, and I was like, this is crazy. There's got to be a creative way to go about oppression, or a creative way to go about the things that are wrong with this world that I'm just realizing are so wrong. And, now I've mellowed out a lot, in the many years since then. But kind of came upon a lot of different artists who aren't well known, I think, in a mainstream sense, but who were creating their own work on stage and were really breaking the boundaries of what performance could look like. And were doing insane kind of experimental things that I was just like, that's so interesting and exciting to me. And so that's, I had made some crazy vow that I would become a performance artist, and well, my dream came true. Here I am. And I say that with some hesitancy because it's just, I guess it's not as, it's been a great life, but I guess it's not been as, easy or as charmed as I had thought. It's been a lot of work. And, but, I can't imagine my life going any other way. So here I am. I make my own shows, and you introduced me by actually one of my older projects. I had a website called BigBadChineseMama.com, which is how I first met you, Yayoi, which was my project out of college when I finished school, with a fake mail-order bride website, which at the time was huge because this is pre-Friendster, right? Pre-MySpace, pre-Friendster.
That's right.
And at that time, it was very rare to even have a website. And what I was reacting to was in school when I would Google Asian woman. You didn't even use Google then. It was Yahoo. We do a Yahoo search.
Back in the old days.
Yeah, back in the old days, when we actually used Yahoo. You look up Asian women and you get pornography sites and mail-order bride websites. And I had this idea that what if I created a site that subverted people looking for pornography and gave them a whole host of fake mail-order brides. And so that was one of these kind of first projects that launched my career, and it was a really interesting creative project for me because it was met, of course, with a lot of opposition, both from people who are Asian and not. And but it was great for me because it was really like, wow, it's an interesting thing to embrace enemies and to create an environment where people will hate you, which is a very hard thing for someone who was raised like I was to be raised to make everyone like you. So, so that's one of many projects I've done since then. And
No, it's very clever. In fact, that's when I had first heard about you through Yayoi. She recommended that I check out the website, Big Bad Chinese Mama. And
which is still up.
I'm sorry?
That website is still up.
Oh, it's still up, yes.
And you can actually submit yourself now to be a bride, but it's unfortunately kind of a fairly abandoned website as I've moved on to things that are more interesting to me. But
are you suggesting Robert submit himself as a bride?
Yes, put on a dress.
I could do that.
On and hawk yourself.
I just might do that. So, sexy voices of Hollywood fans, check out the site. Big Bad Chinese Mama. Your shows are really funny, but they always draw attention.
Thank you.
You're very welcome, and I mean that quite seriously. But they always draw attention to important issues. Can you describe in detail some of the shows you've done and how that works?
I kind of described this ulcer I had in college, and that was this huge revelatory moment. I just remember being so there was this kind of culture of activism at UCLA where I did my undergrad at, where it was just kind of like, not only are we mad at the man, we're going to scream and yell and go hoarse, like railing against the man. And I just, and I was one of those people my first year, just angry, I'm so mad, and you're just like screaming against the wall, and it's very frustrating, and you lose energy very quickly, and I mean, I think the last decade, right, where we tried to stop a war we could not stop and stuff like that, it's very frustrating, and especially when you put anger up against an oppressive system, it just can be really draining. So I just got, it's going to be a long fight, so we might as well enjoy it. And so that's been this approach to
to embrace humor more than make the situation as agonizing. You know, with art, to relive the agony on stage, it's not fun for me, and it's not fun for the audience. And I think now we have stuff like, you've got Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert, and you have people who are very funny about politics. So it is quite more commonplace than it was, than what I was seeing 10 years ago. 10 years ago, it was like, oh my God, they're just like swimming in torture. And so the big project that has consumed a lot of my life in the last 4 years is one of my solo shows, which has done quite well, and it's called Wong Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and it was me initially interested in doing a show about depression and suicide among Asian American women, who have the highest rates of depression and suicide in this country, unfortunately, and was just interested in, initially I went in going, I'm going to make a show, and I'm not going to do any more of these crazy self-indulgent shows. I'm going to take it really seriously. I'm going to take this really seriously, and I'm going to interview people. Yeah, I'm going to be an anthropologist. I'm going to interview people and ask them about depression. And very quickly, it was hard. Like, I only had to interview a couple of women who approached me about their depression, and found myself was sobbing more than they were during it, and it so ends up becoming this show about how hard it was to make this show, and kind of my very naive intentions of trying to make a show where I thought I could possibly save everybody, and all the guilt that I experienced, and how I almost felt like I was in high school again, where, you know, like when I was in high school, it's all this pressure to be successful and not embarrass anyone, and we'll see you at graduation when you go collect your trophies. And it was very much the same way with this show. Is everyone was like giving me wish lists of communities to save. Don't forget to save Lao women. Don't forget to do the story of postpartum women. Don't forget. And I was just like, I just felt like everyone was saddling me with responsibilities with what the show was supposed to be, but nobody was going to help me. And, you know, of course it was my project. So it ends up becoming the self-satirizing show about a character named Kristina Wong who's trying to save everybody.
No, is that the show that had that you had people knitting?
Yes. Yeah. So during that whole process, I was so just the creative process can be so agonizing. It's like the worst case of constipation in your life, and like that's what that is like for me when I'm working on a show. It's like I've got a big turd stuck in me and I can't get it out. And you know, so what I would do is I'd just sit on my couch sobbing because I was just like, how am I going to do this show? How am I going to do this show? Oh my God. And I would just knit and knit and knit, and I would knit 5 strands at a time so I could knit a whole scarf in like 2 hours because I was using super big needles, and I mean, it's the only way I could work through all the stress was to knit. And so it became compulsive. I was finding myself buying, like in the middle of the night, I'd go on eBay and buy huge lots of yarn from people, and
what?
It was like comforting to me.
Are you serious?
It was like I was like my own private hoarders episode, and
sad.
I mean, now it's not so much. Now I now have a little bit of carpal tunnel in my right wrist.
You actually ask audience members to bring their knitting, right?
I do. I ask them to knit in the audience, and I'm knitting on stage, and I talk, and my sweater is unraveling as I keep going through the show. And it's like kind of this metaphor for this slow unravel. Wow.
It sounds very therapeutic, and is very therapeutic for those who can relate.
It is. It was really successful. I mean, I think the misconception I've had people go, so your show's about making fun of people who are depressed? I'm like, no, not at all. I do make fun of myself a lot, and you know, I've been a person who has been depressed before. I think we all have, and I kind of make fun of more of the silence around it, or this need, or at least as I had experienced in my family, to keep this kind of stuff a secret. It was just so one of the first opening monologues is like, I've never been depressed, my mother's never been depressed, none of the women in my family have ever been depressed. In fact, there's no depression in China. That's just
oh my
you know, but to go over the top with hiding how and that's why I think that problem persists. And it's a big show where I'm just trying to lie to the audience that I'm doing well when I'm not doing well as a character in the show. And it's gone really well, and it was a very hard process to make. My premiere was 2 hours long, and it was still very stuck to me, the show, and now very much it's a performance, and very much the character of Kristina Wong is a character. But I was beginning to worry about when people were able to separate the Kristina Wong in real life from the Kristina Wong on stage. And because afterwards, after the show, people will be like, "Oh, so when you were hospitalized," and I was like, "Well, I was never hospitalized," But it's just a tricky thing, and that's how I thrust myself into my work. Is that I very much am a character. If you look at the progression of these characters and these performances I've done, they've all been about archetypes I've created out of my own identity. But now the archetypes I'm playing with is the archetype called Kristina Wong, and which is really dangerous because it becomes tricky to date. It becomes tricky to relate to people because there are some details that I obviously fudge and play around with that never happened in real life. So yes, and that is the kind of in my new show now, which I'm actually performing tonight at the Red Cat, a show called Cat Lady. And it's kind of about the existential crisis that I went through the last 4 years, creating a show about depression and suicide, and touring the show and being in really intense situations. I would go to college campuses where there had been a student suicide, and the campus had decided that, and I was glad and happy to be part of that for them. That the best way they could address it is to bring a show, and that's usually because it's hard to have an event where it's like, let's talk about something really awful, and then every student who walks in that room feels bad about being there. It sounds depressing. So it was, it definitely took its toll on me. And so now I've created a concept film of that show so it can exist without me having to, pack up my bags and fly across the country and show up on a campus and then try to put my life back together when I get back off of tour. It can be a tricky life. So, but my show Cat Lady is a lot about this kind of existential crisis of me doing the same script for 4 years while everyone around me was kind of moving on in their real lives. And not that I don't live a real life, but they were getting married and having babies, and I was kind of in the same loop of non-change, right? Because I was doing the same script over and over and over and over again. And so it's a lot about loneliness, and I thought it would be kind of a fun show, but it ended up touching on all these things I didn't realize it would. I look a lot at, I was comparing my life a lot to that of the pickup artist, these guys who take the subculture of guys who teach and take workshops about how to pick up women, and their techniques are really theatrical, and I thought I learned about them through The Game, which is Neil Strauss's book about the underground culture of pickup artists, and this show on VH1 about aspiring pickup artists, and they're very despicable in weird ways. A lot of people are just so despicable, and I had thought they were really despicable too. I still kind of do, but I was just I kind of have a lot in common with these guys. They go from bar to bar, entertaining and doing these kind of monologues and routines on women and feigning the sincerity, and I kind of do the same thing with my show. I get to know people in these cities. I introduce a version of myself that they think is the real thing, and I give them some kind of sense of genuine connection, and then I'm off to the next city. Now, they sleep with their audiences, and they'll call them the next day, and that kind of stuff. I don't do that. but that's actually what this new show is about, is this idea that me as a cat lady and these guys as pickup artists actually have a lot in common in this very strange, performative, lonely life that we have as performers.
You make a lot of statements on behalf of women through your work, and so would you consider yourself a feminist, quote unquote, or?
I absolutely believe I'm a feminist. I try not to say that I speak. It's a tricky thing because sometimes I try not to say that I'm speaking on behalf of people because I don't like it when people speak on behalf of me. But I definitely get that people would assume that because there is kind of a culture of work in the same genre that I do where there is this assumption that I, on behalf of women, on behalf of Asians everywhere, this show is about depression and suicide. And I kind of make fun of that in Wong's Over the Cuckoo's Nest, that I attempt to speak on behalf of everyone, but it just fails. Because I think that's where the problems can start in terms of stereotypes or in terms of silencing communities is when someone decides that they have license to understand what exactly millions of people have gone through and speak on their behalf. So, but I do consider myself a feminist. It took a while because it's gotten a bad rep, that word. But I do feel like when you own a word like that, you should also think about how what you do can help redefine it and help give it dimension and not make it a dirty word. And it's unfortunate that it's become a dirty word because it's a necessary word, and it's necessary for us to have feminists if we're to progress as women. Anyway, what else? I'm a feminist.
Well, it sounds like you're doing a lot of important work, and you certainly are. It's quite a juggling act, to say the least. Besides performing, you also teach workshops.
I do.
Tell us about some of them.
Well, I'm interested in teaching alternative kinds of performance, and I teach a lot of solo performance workshops, and different from like someone gets on stage and just kind of blah, 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 talks about their life, but looking at different ways of storytelling and bringing artifacts from their lives and bringing those to life and finding interactive modes of storytelling. I don't know what else to say about that. For some time, I taught a workshop in the city of L.A. when there was still funding for the arts in Los Angeles. I taught a workshop called Because, which was for women of color.
Yay!
It was really amazing.